Aliens Colonial Marines. There have been few games I have been following as closely in throughout their development cycle as this game. I remember when this was first announced way back in 2008 for the PlayStation 2. Back then, it was being developed by Check 6 Games and was to be published by Fox Interactive and Electronic Arts. However, that never came to fruition. But it was then picked up by Sega, who acquired basically the entire Aliens franchise from 20th Century Fox and had thus gave it to Gearbox to develop. And while Gearbox claims that their game is not based on the framework of the PlayStation 2 Check 6 game, or pre-developed game, I call bullshit. And frankly, they're too similar. The basic layouts, the plot, even, everything is just, you guys took at least the starting framework. You were working from the same basic start material. But that's beside the point. Let's get into more of what. Is this a good game? Is this a bad game? Well, if you've seen other reviews, it's mostly coming out as very, very negative. I wouldn't say it's as negative as most people are claiming it is, but it's certainly a disappointment. If you want a better Aliens game, get the 2010 Aliens vs. Predator. It actually is a really, really good Aliens, Predator, and Colonial Marine experience. However, I will say there are some good things, and I'll get into that in a second. Now, so we make this all clear, I bought my version on Steam, playing it on Windows, and therefore my experience, especially when you're talking about PCs, is going to be very different from some other people's. For example, one of the big complaints people have is the Alien AI. A lot of people have said it's been very, very glitchy. There's been a lot of mistakes, very stupid. Basically, very stupid AI. And that's another thing I have to get into in a little bit. But I didn't have as big of problems as other people said they had. I don't know if that just means whatever I got in my system, whatever drivers I have, or whatever video cards, graphics cards, or whatever I have in my system, I guess for whatever reason works really well with this game. At least when it comes to AI scripting, because I really haven't seen any of those massive AI problems where it's derp stupid. My AI partners they get in the way every now and then, but they don't act completely stupid. They seem to be very useful in a firefight. I can't speak for the Xbox version, and I cannot speak if other people's system setups, their characters just act derp. I haven't had it, and that might be why I am not being as negative as some of these other people, just because the AI script worked better on my system. So let me make that clear in case anyone goes, well, I had this game and the AI just stood there staring at walls. It might have done. I can only base it based on my experience, and it didn't do that on my system. However, I've seen enough video gameplay of other people's reviews where it's done that to believe that in a lot of other people's games it does. Anyway, now my biggest complaint though with this is not so much the AI script, but the script itself, i.e. the plot. And I'm going to save that for last because that requires the most talk. So let's get into some of the other things. Sound design is awesome. You have all the classic sounds from the from previous video games, from the movies. Everything sounds authentic. Of course, they have Michael Biehn and Lance Henriksen come back. Although Michael Biehn really sounds like he's just disappointed that he's been coming back to kind of redo these same lines again. However, Lance Henriksen is fine doing this stuff. He does not care. He does not care, but he still puts an effort into it. That's the difference. Like, Michael Biehn just doesn't care. He's like, I'm Corporal Hicks. Lance Henriksen puts his effort into it, but I guess the guy doesn't find any shame in this. He's like, listen, I'm making a paycheck here. This is good money. This alien thing turned into a cash cow, man. This is awesome. I show up, I talk into a microphone for a day, and they give me like $100,000. This is great. Anyway, but the rest of the sound design, they even go so far as to give, the Weyland-Yutani guys have their own rifle, and they give it a unique sound, but it still sounds like it belongs in the universe. So good on them. The aliens make their classic sounds. The soundtrack is great. So there's a good thing. AI, yeah, the bugs in this one are not the smartest. And same thing with the human enemies, which yes, there are human enemies in this, and this is Angry Joe complained a lot about the fact that there were human enemies. Angry Joe's out of his mind when it comes to that, because this is the thing. In the Aliens first-person shooters, there's always been, well, not always, but most of the time there are human enemies you have to fight. I remember way back in Alien Trilogy, a first-person shooter for the PlayStation 1. Half the enemies in that game were humans as well. It didn't ruin the experience. Actually they fit a little bit better in that one. But yeah, they had human enemies in that one. They had human enemies in the AVP games, except for the first AVP game. Well, first AVP first-person shooter. If you want to go back to like the arcade one, yes, you actually fought it. Even if you were playing as a human or a predator, you fought Marines in that game. Maybe not as much as the aliens, but you fought a bunch of Marines as well. The more recent AVP game, you wound up having to fight humans or other combat androids. AVP 2, same thing. It's been a part of the franchise, and frankly, this was the most exciting aspect I found about doing Colonial Marines. If it was focusing more on the Marines and the Marine aspect, hey, maybe we would get to see more of why are the Colonial Marines around? What threats do they normally fight? Joe wanted the aliens to be the primary enemy, and later on they get introduced as introduced to human Weyland and Tawny PMCs. No, I say the opposite. Show us a bit more of the Marines taking on their normal foes, and then you introduce the Xenomorphs as the ultimate threat. Why? Well, build up the Xenos as the main threat. So you should have started off with what I think was back to the Check 6 Games original plot, was the original. You were going to be fighting more like scavengers that were trying to pick the Sulacos, like get all this nice fancy supplies and stuff, and then you guys show up and you're like, oh shit, Popo's here. See, we get to deal with what you'd be like the Marines' normal threat, and then they start going, oh wait, there's other shit on here. Oh wow, what are these things? And now they're more of a threat. But I digress. The human enemies, though, do have some scripting issues. They don't take cover that well, and it becomes somewhat of an issue when you're trying to engage in long-range combat, and it seems there's a maxed range on the pulse rifle. Like, it seems sometimes when you can see some guy way out, and I got, great thing, by the way, they put in this is customization of the weapons, which is something you normally would see from an Aliens game, because it's not a universe where it seems more like you're just given standard issue equipment and you do not mess with it. No, here they do a lot of customization. So, I got my pulse rifle with some really nice gear to shoot from a distance. And I'm shooting at these guys. It's got the laser sight. It's got the other better sights on it, and it still doesn't seem to be hitting these guys. But if I pull out the assault rifle, I think it's called, it works. I can hit them. So I think in the scripting, there's an automatic max range on the pulse rifle, and it gets a little annoying when you're fighting enemies and you're aiming and you're doing clear shots at these guys, but it's not hitting because the script is telling the bullet, that's too far, you stop at like 100 meters or something like that. But you just have to remember to switch over to your more long-range rifle. The aliens AI, their aliens are certainly not as tough as they used to be. They seem to come at you kind of straight on, and that might have been acceptable if they put more aliens on screen. Now you could dumb down the aliens and put them on a, how should I put it? Not higher pedestal, but you can make them easier to kill and a little bit dumber if you're throwing more of them at us and making more of a horde attack. If not, they really should have looked towards AVP and try to get the same scripting for that, because the aliens were smart in there. Here, not so much. I mean, you could argue that's how the aliens really would be. If the aliens work, I think also part of the problem is there's a lot of open environments, and aliens, the xenomorphs, are not a big threat in open environments. You kind of see they are ultimately an animal that just happens to be really dangerous close in. So the alien's natural dangerous environment is when you have these creepy corridors where there's tons of different holes where aliens can pop out from, not in wide open like outside of the colony having all this space. So I think the problem really is that they put the aliens in environments in which kind of reality almost sets in. Like this is kind of what I always look at aliens is why these xenomorphs in so much of the expanded books and everything else considered such a threat when it seems very easily you could be able to deal with these things. Once you're in an open environment, they're really easy to kill. It's when they're in a very tight corridors of a spaceship or the tight quarters of a colony that's very modularized and has all these like hidden compartments and such. That's where they're dangerous. But if you're engaging them in open field combat, you have rifles. They don't. They have to run up towards you. Another problem, though, this is one other thing. I think they missed out, and this might have been, I think, a whole thing with their AI programming. They had a hard time putting in expendable AIs because you're supposed to be under the impression that there's 100 Marines with you stuck on LV-426, and you never see more than it's like 4. Like there's occasionally 1 or 2 spots where you'll pick up a couple of extra Marines, but they're always talking about like assaults where there's tons of Marines. I have a feeling that was in the plot script, and they just could not get it to work the way they wanted it to, and so they just dropped it. So you are constantly told that there's 100 Marines on this planet, but you never feel the scale. Like there's a cutscene where you're like charging the Weyland-Yutani main base, and you've got a drop ship, you got like 5 or 6 APCs, but you never see like the troops that were with those APCs. And there's a couple of moments where I think you were supposed to have fought with like a bunch of other Marines, but they deleted them, and it really feels missing. So that's AI. Graphics-wise and art design, the graphics are acceptable, certainly. No problems with that. You've seen the screenshots. You know what to expect. As for the art design, there's things I love about the art design, and there's things I don't like about the art design. Let me get into a few things that I love. The weapons look very authentic, although most of them seem to come straight from the Colonial Marines Technical Manual, which is a book that was put out around the time of Alien 3, maybe a little after. I have a PDF version on my computer. It's a great little expanded universe, and it's become basically de facto canon. And really, among Aliens fans, the Colonial Marines Technical Manual is considered the ultimate source of canon for anything Colonial Marines related. In there, they explain the workings of the smart guns. It's amazing how, it's the smart guns, the APCs, they expand upon the Colonial Marines themselves. They give us more weapons that we never saw in the films. They give us more vehicles like tanks and armored and artillery, and they talk about more spaceships. However, we never see it. That's like the one thing I wish they had more pictures in there to show us some of the other cool equipment that they talk about but they never show. Like the Bougainville class attack cruiser or something. I forget. It's Bougainville class something. It's like the replacement of the Sulaco class. Well, not so it's Consuloga class, whatever. I'm getting very nerdy here, aren't I? But we never see that one like pictured in there. However, actually in Aliens vs. Predator 2010, we actually do get to finally see one of those ships. That's like the actual ship that shows up to rescue everybody. Because that's kind of weird, because they kind of like, in the, how should I put it, in the lead up to this, they're big emphasis, like, we're taking stuff from the Colonial Marines Tactical Manual. No one's ever done that. I'm sitting there like, actually, the 2010 Aliens vs. Predator took a lot of stuff from the Technical Manual. You had the battle rifle, which is more of a sniper rifle. That was from the Technical Manual, which, by the way, comes back here. So we see that again. We get the attack ship. I wish we saw more vessels. I wish they did a new one. I was surprised more science fiction universes haven't published more technical manuals like that. Star Wars has. We get to see that from from Star Wars, where they kind of show us the ships and such, like the cutaways, like those sell well. This technical manual has become legendary. Google this, or not Google this, look this up on Amazon. It's running for like about $120 if you can find it, which is why so many people have to go for the PDFs. I'm really shocked we have not seen more of types of these books put out that can expand upon like the military aspects of these fictional universes. I mean, think about it. Think about even something like from the Chronicles of Riddick, like showing us more of the necromorph system and all that. People would gobble that up like crazy. Same thing with the Avengers. Like, imagine if you put out a side book with the Avengers that was like the Shield technically. It shows us like the different uniforms and divisions of Shield. Like, give us more detail on the helicarrier and stuff. Give us like intel files on the various threats that aren't shown in the universe, but taken from the Marvel universe and stuff like that. People would buy that. You don't have to make a ton of money, but it's going to make a profit. But I digress. So there's a lot of stuff for the manual that they do bring in. Art design also great with the actual look of the Colonial Marines, because one of the things I got a little bit annoyed with AVP 10 and even AVP 2, which I consider probably one of the best adaptations for doing something different with the Aliens franchise, was the actual outfits that they're wearing, the camouflage pattern on the Marines, and the camouflage on Marines uniforms, and their different camouflage pattern on their armor, very much right out of the movie. They're exactly out of the movie. They really recreated that. AVP 2010, they actually just wore all gray, and it's like, why did you have them wear all gray? Was the thing I kept on asking. When clearly in the movie they're wearing like a desert-style camouflage with like green camouflage on their armor. Even if you went with this olive drab on the uniform and the armor, okay, I would buy that as like an alternate uniform, but why the all-gray thing? Obviously, you had the tech, you had the visual processing power. This one, they go back and do that. And even AVP, like I said, AVP 2, they didn't do that in that game. They had like green uniforms and like a tan armor. It was kind of weird. Even the RTS one had like gray armor and they were in like brown uniforms. It was like no one seems to do the uniforms from the movie. So there was a nice little nod there. However, certain environments, especially on the Sulaco, were way too small compared to what we saw in the movie. Like when you first go into the hangar, that's supposedly the hangar from the film, it is tiny compared to what we saw in the film. It's like maybe a quarter of the size, if not even smaller, compared to what we see in film. Like, this is a game. You guys have virtually no limitation on the amount of space you want to put in. And yeah, maybe you want to say, oh, it'd be too big for them to maneuver around, but have it so that there's a bunch of little Easter eggs. It's the main hangar bay of the ship, so you can really get away with this having that be like, oh, this is where we do the investigation thing. We find all the little tidbits from the movie. So, give us that. You can have this expansive hangar bay. It was a scene that didn't do any action anyway, but it gives us the scale of the ship, how big it's supposed to be. And also it makes us more remember from the film. And you can always just say the other smaller hangar bays are just backup hangar bays. And I could buy that. I could buy that this ship has a bit of a modular design where they have secondary hangar bays and such. And then you go into also like the locker room. The locker room is really, really tiny compared to what we see in the film. It's again maybe half the size, if not smaller. And it's noticeable how small it is. So, expand that a little bit. Again, this was another scene that was supposed to be like, this is the locker from the movie, but it's way, way smaller. You just kind of run through it real fast. And even the sleeping bay, where everyone's in hypersleep. It's, again, only like half the size. Why did you not make it bigger to make it just like the movie? And also, I'm surprised they only had the one like sleeping chamber. Like the one thing, like throughout the rest of the ship, you keep on coming across random control rooms and other things. You're like, what purpose does this serve? If you wanted to just have a filler, Why don't you just do more sleeping bays? Like, the ship was equipped that if they had to evacuate that colony, almost everyone on the colony could be brought onto the Sulaco and put into these sleeping. That seems like it would both make sense, and it gives you an excuse for all of these, it gives you an excuse for rooms that seemingly kind of serve no purpose but are just along the way. Is that, the ship like the Sulaco is made to kind of is on standby to respond to these things because it's overloaded with these sleeping bays that are kind of put in other sections of the ship. So if they have to evacuate a colony, they can load up like 200 people on that ship, no problem. And they could have showed us other things other than like this random control rooms on a ship that's mostly automated. Give us like other conference rooms. Give us more cargo bays. Give us a sense that the ship is very modularized and that it could respond to a greater variety of missions. That would have been great. Also, like the idea of going into the Sulaco and it has these like huge. I can buy that it's got like a huge corridor to transport big, heavy equipment like APCs and stuff, and then this huge cargo containers. Well, why does it have the windows? It's a ship. It's a military vessel in space. It shouldn't have big, easily to break windows. If you wanted a scene that like this show us like a outside so we can see the two ships fighting, just do that. Like just have a room. Like make it like a conference room with like a windows that are just like blast shields can come down from them, but it does show us like the space. You could have done that. That got a little annoying. So I do criticize that aspect of the design. The too small a scale and the kind of not. The Sulaco doesn't feel like the Sulaco from the movie, basically. However, when you get to the colony, that feels a little bit more like it actually feels a lot like from the movie. You get a much better sense. And I'll give them huge props for whoever designed the colony aspect, the colony levels. Even though it should really not be there because it should have been wiped out in that explosion. I mean, completely. It's heavily destroyed, but you're kind of like, what was the big threat from that explosion? Because outside of the operations room, it seemed like if you just went to the next room over, the entire Sulaco crew would have survived fine. So I guess if it was up to me, it would have been the outlying buildings. Like there was support complexes for the colony, and that's what they were in. And they were much further away from the blast, and that's why they kind of survived. That would have been better, more believable. So art design's great. Now it's time to get, I guess, into the plot. And for those of you that want to say, hey, it's a video game, I don't care about the plot. Well, I do, and there's a lot of other people that do watch or play a game and like to get immersed into the plot. It's telling. I'm a big single-player guy, so I like the plots. I want my game to tell a narrative. So if you're not one of those guys, that's fine. But, keep in mind that there are a lot of people that like the single-player aspects, think that games should also be a storytelling medium. And therefore, since it also tries to be a story, I'm going to criticize the story. Because, man, there is so many plot holes in this setup. And I can only blame executive meddling with this. Because I have a feeling this is what happened. You had the Check 6 Games, which has thought of a way to reintroduce the Sulaco. From all indications in that game, you're originally coming across Sulaco, and it's being picked over by scavengers. And then those scavengers, you had to fight them off. Maybe you found a couple of xenomorphs, which, again, you have scavengers on there. You don't have to explain why. They see a military vessel that's been abandoned in space. Of course, that shit's going to have a lot of stuff that you can salvage off that vessel. Think of the advanced computer networks, the weapons, like probably even the sleeping pods and stuff are probably top of the line. You want to take that stuff and then sell it. And of course, since you have this big crew on there, a couple of them get infected with an alien, it starts spreading, voila. We can buy it. Again, we have to go, how many eggs did that queen lay on there? I guess, we do have that to go like, what? Why is there another alien egg on there? But it's more believable than what they did in this game. Hell, they could have even just left it over the game, or with just doing a few adjustments, left this as LV4 Fury 161. They could have just left it over there and just had it backtrack. Unless they didn't want to. Oh, I'll get into what they could have done. Let me just explain the stupidity in this. All right, so apparently in this movie, in this game, Weyland-Yutani takes to Sulaco away from the vicinity of Fury 161 and brings it back to LV-426, and then sets up a lab experiment on there, like a lab, an alien research operation on the Sulaco, expecting the Colonial Marines never to show up and find it. Mind you, they also set up a massive alien research facility on the planet near the original alien crash ship. Why do you need to do tests on the Sulaco if you have a full research facility on the surface of the planet? Makes no sense. And they try to lampshade it. Lampshading means you kind of call attention to it to go, hey, even we were kind of wondering why. And it tends to normally make you... It helps with suspension of disbelief. It doesn't help here, though. Because they go, why did they bring this back here? We won't answer that, but we lampshade it, so it's okay. No, it's not okay. There's nothing we could think of that is given to us in the game makes any sense for why they brought this ship back. And then why, of course, attack the Sulaco crew, or attack the rescuing Marines. It's like, alright, the Marines are here, let's just slaughter them. Because surely, in like the 20-25 minutes that you're engaged and they're aware that you're Weyland-Yutani PMCs, they're not going to shoot back a message to Colonial Marine Command going, hey, we showed up on the planet, we found the Sulaco, we boarded it, and a bunch of Weyland-Yutani guys are now attacking us. You've got some explaining to do. And I'll get into what I think they actually meant for this fall to be before they made it Weyland-Yutani in just a second. But let me go into more of the stupidity, because there's more plot holes. So both ships wind up destroying each other. Like, again, I'm wondering what the PMCs were thinking. Okay, we're going to blow up this ship that's directly next to us, only like less than 100 meters away. So its debris will then smash into our ship, and the only way we can get off is the drop ships from that ship coming to pick up their Marines. Like, what were these guys were suicidal for PMCs. PMCs normally are not that, they're mercenaries. They're only there because they're being paid to fight there. They're normally, very cautious when it comes to their own skin. Yeah, they don't seem like the suicide types. Anyway, then you crash, you set up like an base on the planet, and one thing I'm wondering is where are all these aliens coming from? Because they try to make it like, oh yeah, Weyland-Yutani's bringing in people and like infecting them. Like, how many of these things got out and are infecting other people now? Because you meet hundreds, if not thousands, of aliens on this planet. And AVP2 had an excuse for the huge size of the hive in that game. In that game, you were on a planet that had its own ecosystem. So the aliens, of course, were getting aliens from this infecting the creatures on the planet. And the colony that got wiped out numbered well over 1,000. So when it fell, you had right there a couple of probably like 800 humans all of a sudden became got face tugged and became aliens. So right there's your huge numbers. We can buy that. In this game, there's only the test subjects that Weyland-Yutani brings. Apparently they all escaped, and even though we're kind of shown that the PMCs are kind of holding their own against the aliens, like, where are they all coming from? It's never explained, really. Anyway, so you get there, you then eventually figure out that Weyland-Yutani has set up a research base near the original alien crash ship. Okay, kind of can buy that. How they did this all in 17 days, I don't know. And by the way, this is what pisses me most off in this game, is they try to use the term 17 weeks. No, they quite clearly in Aliens said the rescue team would be there in 17 days. Like, apparently after they failed to check in, Another team, this bigger group of Marines would be dispatched to check up on the Sulaco in case there's like a big emergency, and it would only be about 17 days for them to get there. A little over 2 weeks. So they try to make it seem like it's a much longer time. No. It's quite clear in the movie that it's 17 days, and movie beats your little canon. So no changing it to 17 weeks. Anyway, back on track. Then they find out there's a Marine from the original Sulaco still alive. And you would normally, I think the designers probably felt, you'd start thinking it's like Hudson or maybe maybe one of like the couple of the other guys that like had, like there was those 2 Marines that are there, but nobody ever remembers their name. Like Wazowski, I think, is one of them. Like you're thinking maybe one of them. Maybe you could even try to pull off something like it's Gordon, like Gordon and Vasquez somehow didn't blow up. It'd be really stupid, but it'd be not as stupid as what they did here. Except everybody already knows who it's going to be. And I'll tell you who it is, because I told you what 2 people come back. Michael Biehn and Lance Hendrickson. Lance Hendrickson's already there as another bishop, and we kind of know that he definitely was up on Fury 1. Actually, Lance Hendrickson would have worked out better as being the original bishop. Like, they found the original bishop, and even though Ripley thought she like ruined her circuits, Weyland-Yutani put some major effort into repairing him, and they repaired the original bishop. They get his information. I would have found that fine. Like, they picked, after they went to Fury 161, they went back to LE 426. But no, it's Michael Biehn, and everyone knows it's Michael Biehn because he does like this intro, and you're going, I don't believe that they got Michael Biehn just to do that couple of second distress message, and that was it. So he comes back, and they don't even explain how it was him. Like they knew that there was a massive plot hole by saying Hicks survived, and yes, plenty of people wanted Hicks to survive and not get killed off screen on Alien 3. But they try to make it like, Weyland-Yutani boarded the ship, which by the way they didn't in Alien 3. That's made clear, and that somehow it's a long story, but somebody else wound up in that sleeping bay. Now there is apparently a planned first-person single-player DLC, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's what they're doing. Let me tell you this story, and it'll be like the PMCs board it, and well, it's a ex-Colonial Marine that sympathizes with Hicks. How did they get waked up? Well, it said the computer will come up, but it's clear in Alien 3 that there was no mention of when she accesses the flight recorder. It doesn't say Weyland-Yutani boarded the vessel. And there was a massive firefight. No. A fire started on the ship, and that's how it got out. I mean, it was quite clear in the movie that it was a fire started off by an alien. And everyone got emergency ejected. So there's no reason. Hicks is dead. If you wanted to pull a clone plot line, which I thought that's what they were going to do, like, we cloned him. Just because you clone someone doesn't give him the memories. And besides, you had the Sulaco and all of its reports. Why did you need to keep Hicks alive? Makes no reason why you would keep him. You have the more useful information. You have all his reports. You have all the sensory data from the Sulaco. Anyway, you and your Marines eventually wound up taking Hicks along and attacking the one. Of course, Weyland-Yutani has another faster than light ship. You board it. You do a stupid, not even really a boss battle. It's somewhat a boss battle. It's trying to recreate that Newt at the end of Aliens, where she's ducking and hiding from the Queen as the Queen's trying to hunt her down. And I saw what they were doing there, and I somewhat appreciated it. But you do that, your captain sacrifices himself, because apparently after doing all what you did, it still doesn't kill the Queen. So congratulations, hero, you didn't really do anything. And you confront the Michael Wayland from Alien 3, only turns out it's not the real one, it's a android. So we didn't really do anything. Yay! So many problems with that plot. So many. And allow me to get into them a bit. This is what pisses me off, because I think I know what they were planning to do, and it would have made actually that entire plot, minus the Hicks issue, make sense. I think originally it was not supposed to be Weyland-Yutani as the main human enemy, but the UPP, the Union of Progressive Peoples. Now, for those of you that don't know what the UPP is, it's something that really only hardcore Aliens fans know about. And let me give you a little refresher. Back in the late 80s, I think it was it might have been 90, 91, the sequel to Aliens had been in development hell. They were floating around, but it was finally coalescing around a single script that was going to feed on the fuel from Aliens and take us further. And in that script, it basically had a Cold War analogy. That there was a group of breakaway colonies that were the main threat to the Colonial Marines and the Earth government and all that, that was basically a Soviet Union analogy called the Union of Progressive Peoples. And so the plot was about them intersecting, finding kind of either the Sulaco drifted into their territory or they just kind of were looking for stuff. Boarded the Sulaco, found some alien eggs, and eventually that led to that big space station we saw in Start of Alien. They get back there and they wind up having that whole space station get infected, and they would have to learn to team up with the UPP survivors to actually survive the whole situation. You can find the script online. It reads a lot better than what they wound up doing with Alien 3. However, slight problem. The Cold War ended. So they immediately dropped, the executives decided, since the Cold War is over, audiences won't see anything related to the Cold War. And this is, I guess, somewhat true. There was a couple of movies that came out around that time that they kind of show if you do something about current events and then that current event ends, the film will flop. Rambo 3, good example. It came out literally, I think, a month after the end of the Afghan war with the Soviets. And lo and behold, it didn't do that well because a lot of people didn't see the correct analogy. So I understand why the executives didn't want to do that, but it was such a better script, and it would have really given us what everybody wanted. It would have given us some more of what we saw with Aliens, the natural progression. It would have showed us why there is a Colonial Marine Corps. And it seemed like a really good script, full of action. And ever since then, since Alien 3 was so universally rejected, because after that, then they kind of searched and they found a script that was actually about space monks, and then they changed the monks to being prisoners. You can see the mess that was going on with Alien 3. But most fans agree that they really wish that Alien 3 was the UPP script. So much so that it has remained in fanon, as it's called, the fanon lore, that the UPP is actually part of the Aliens universe. And what makes me think that this was originally supposed to be them is Alien Colonial Marines was originally going to have a counterpart on the DS. Aliens Colonial Marines on the DS. And then at some point, they split the two off, where that became Aliens Insurrection, I believe it was called. Let me double check here. Aliens Infestation. Now, this game was originally, like I said, called Aliens Colonial Marines, so that's telling me that these two games were supposed to be, how you have that standard, we're going to put the main game out, and then we're going to have the mobile version. I think at some point, these two teams, one got delayed. I think Colonial Marines got delayed again, and they decided to change some things. So I think Infestation has basically the original plot for Colonial Marines in it. And in Aliens Infestation, you have a group you have a ship of Colonial Marines. They find a Sulaco, but the Sulaco has been boarded by soldiers from the UPP. And the UPP has taken over the Sulaco. You've got to fight both the aliens off and the UPP. You wind up going back down to LV-426. Yeah, the UPP and the aliens are already engaged. Apparently they fucked up. So you battle through the colony, through a UPP research base that they set up to research these, the original crash ships, and eventually you wind up, getting back into the original alien vessel, the engineer ship, and fight UPP and of course aliens and a new alien hybrid. And it's supposed to be like the actual chest burster that came out from this game. Even came out before Prometheus was done, so they had like their vision of what would happen if you got a space jockey face tugged. Like, this is the thing that came out of the space jockey. And I have a feeling this is exactly what the plot was going to be, and it makes much more sense. Think about it. The UPP is a group of rogue colonies, much more heavily developed. Like they have full-fledged cities and everything on these things. They have a pretty large population, millions and millions of people, if not maybe a billion or two. And they come across the Sulaco immediately, military ship. They can see it's in stasis. Something's going wrong with it. It's had a fire on board. You'd want to take. Okay, it looks like it's been abandoned. Of course, you'd want to grab that thing. Massive intelligence, boom, right there. Hey, we didn't even start this thing. You go on, and then as they're going through the data, hey, crap, these guys found a derelict spaceship from an even more advanced species, and looks like they even found this possible biological weapon on board. Like, they'll probably hear like the rants from Ripney going on. Oh, they want it for the bioweapons division. Of course, you're going to take that ship and your ship, backtrack it back to the alien, to LV-426, which has been wiped out, but from there you can kind of guess where the alien derelict is. So you'd set up and you start immediately doing research on that thing. You want to get that thing done. You're not sure exactly when those Colonial Marines, though, are going to show up. And maybe that was their whole thing. Like, maybe they were, because of the outbreak of aliens, they were supposed to get out, or they were supposed to be laying a trap. You almost get the sense that the Weyland-Yutani guys were all originally supposed to be UPP. They were waiting for the Colonial Marines to show up because it would still take even more time for another response to come back from the main fleet, like before you'd actually have a massive fleet of ships show up to find out what's going on this planet. But aliens got in the way and fucked up their plans. But it makes more sense all of a sudden that why these guys would want to engage the Colonial Marines, why they would be maybe a little bit more willing to try to sacrifice themselves, because they're doing this suicide mission, but it's not because they're being paid, but for the glory of the motherland. It explains much more why, like, think about it, Weyland-Yutani, why are you doing all this research if they think it's going to be a bioweapon? Who are you going to sell the bioweapon to? Oh yeah, the military. So if they showed up, you'd be like, hey guys, we found a great weapon for you, that's what we're doing the research for. Be awesome. And it's our planet anyway. Like, you'd imagine they'd just argue. Like, why would they want to attack the Colonial Marines? Or they could have just gone, okay guys, hey, we found your ship. Got infected by this weird alien thing. We're doing the research on it right now. We brought plenty of security. You want to take the Sulaco back? You're all good. Because really, look at the original aliens. Really, Weyland-Yutani did nothing wrong. Weyland-Yutani, in fact, had safeguards that were broken by Burt acting on his own accord, going against Weyland-Yutani policy to try to get an exclusive deal, or exclusive rights on the discovery of this advanced species. If he had gone through the proper corporate channels, they would have made, as he said, a security issue. They probably would have sent this PMC team. They might have brought in government guys. They were pretty much in the right there. They could have just gone down and, the biggest scary thing, had a few lawyers with you. Hey, You guys are not happy. Well, too bad, Mr. Colonial Marines. Here, talk to our lawyers. As long as you're not shooting at them, the Marines are just going to be like, oh, fuck. See? See how right there, if they just made it the UPP, outside of the fact that the Hicks survived, the plot makes sense immediately. But when you change it to Weyland-Yutani, all of a sudden you start going, why? Yeah, Weyland-Yutani had been enemies before, but it always made sense before. And hell, in Aliens vs. Predator 2, they even did the same thing again with the plot, where it's really Weyland-Yutani is not the actual enemy. It's the fact that the head scientist in charge of the research project has gone completely rogue. And really, most of the corporate guys are not even thinking about fighting against the Marines. It's really that there's also, they hired out a third contract of guys that are much more mercenary-like, much more of a mercenary band called the Iron Bears, and they're doing their own shit. Like, in that one, you got Dr. Eisenberg, who has this obsession with the aliens, and who Weyland-Yutani thinks he's running the thing so crazy, they're thinking about getting rid of him anyway, like firing him. But he brings in this third-party security team called the Iron Bears, and the Iron Bears are what you mainly wind up having to fight because they're basically looting the aliens and the engineer tech and the space jockey tech for their own. So even though you have Weyland-Yutani soldiers and all this stuff set up in that game, it makes they're not the ultimate villain. It's not like the corporate hierarchy is responsible for what's going on. In fact, they're going against what the corporate hierarchy would rather actually have safety. And actually, wonderful little scene in there too, at the start of AVP2, where they actually call out that they're not really interested in it as a weapon. They'd rather have the aliens for doing medical research. And I love that they did that in that game, because it's just it's kind of going. This review's already a little too long-winded. But maybe one of these days I'll just do a review on AVP2. Explain why that sounds like such a good concept. Alright, so I think you got my major impressions about why it falls apart. It's not the best gameplay experience, and the plot is just crap. Which is why if you're going to buy something on Steam, you know what, this still might be worth picking up if you're an Aliens fan, but wait for a Steam sale. Wait for this to go, decent percentage off, and then pick it up. Then it might be worth it. If you're looking to actually get a really good alien experience, buy the Aliens vs. Predator 2 game. It's much, not Aliens vs. Predator. Well, actually, you should pick up Aliens vs. Predator 2. It's a really good game. But pick up the 2010 Aliens vs. Predator game. It's a lot more like, it's a really fun game, and it has a much better gameplay experience. If there's anything else I want to talk about, that was one slight thing. This should have gone with the art direction, but I will give them also credits. When they showed the Weyland-Yutani mercenaries, there have been several incarnations of the Weyland-Yutani, what like Weyland-Yutani soldiers would look like. This one probably is the best. They feel like they fit into the Aliens universe visually looking. You can see them as kind of a PMC complement to the Marines. So definitely, I'll give them a little kudos on that. Better than the orange jumpsuit wearing guys that they had in AVP2. I think that's just about everything. So I would skip it, like I said, wait till it's on sale, or buy it used. Multiplayer, I haven't played that. It's standard multiplayer. Again, Aliens vs. Predator 2010 did a much better job, because when you play at least as the aliens, it's not first-person shooter. Although the RPG system, where you can really spec out exactly what you want from your gears, is really nice. So I'll give them credit on that. But I'm a much more single-player guy, and I have a feeling the multiplayer is going to die relatively quick on this. So if you're going to buy it for the single player, unless you got 4 other people to play with, do the co-op, which, by the way, I haven't done. I must admit that outright, mainly because the other guy I was going to buy with this, and we're both going to play, he decided to wait till he gets his student loan check in. So I'm not going to be able to play the multiplayer probably for another couple weeks with him. But that is it. We've gone on long enough with the game review. It's pushing 50 minutes now, so signing off. Please like, please subscribe, check out the other videos. Hasta luego.